right, so good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jesse, and I'm here with you at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, and I'm so excited because this is my first broadcast back to kick off our epic school year of programs together. I literally had the second migraine of my life this morning, and I was like crawling along the floor, and I had to get well just to be here, to be part of this really exceptional program to kick off the school year. Thank you all so much to our teachers for coming back. If you've joined us before, if you're new to us, it is thrilling to have you here. We are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science to classrooms around the world through over 40 live free monthly interactive broadcasts. If you haven't checked out our site, we've got all our things there. Our YouTube channel has over 3,000 broadcasts with amazing scientists and explorers around the world. So big thank you for being here. I know a lot of you are signed up for other programs this month, and I'm so excited to see you a whole bunch as we kick off the school year. Before we dive in with today's specific speaker and my intro du jour, I want to note we do have a little Kahoot today. So if you want to play along with a 4-question quiz between our chat and our Q&A, you can go to kahoot.it, put in this game pin. We're going to test your understanding, have a little bit of fun. I know we've got some grade 11 and 12s today. I know you're going to be really quick on the trigger finger on your phone. So we'll see how it goes. If you win, let us know at the end. I'm so excited too today because one of my very favorite scientists is coming back to join us. Taylor Maddalene. I could give you her incredible educational background. I could give you all the amazing groups and people that she's had the chance to work with. But I will kick off by saying that today, as we explore the impacts of plastic on coastal ecosystems, that you could not have a better guide to one of the most important topical exploration and science topics in the world than Taylor. She is going to blow your mind today with a little bit of the amazing work she's done, some of the expeditions she's been on, some of the big challenges facing our planet, and what we are doing to solve them. And I can't think of a better intro than that. Taylor, thank you so much for joining us today, and welcome to my first broadcast. This is so fun.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I know you've got a lot to share with us today, so I will bring you up full screen. You are good to go, and take us away. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you to the whole Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants team for having me back. I always love doing these programs, and I'm psyched to see that we've got a huge range of not only geographies, but ages and different classes and grades. So hopefully there's a little bit of something in here for everyone, and I'm excited to get started. So I'm going to be talking to you guys today about circularity and plastic pollution. So I'm currently a PhD student in environmental engineering, and I'm also the director of what we call our Circularity Informatics Lab at the University of Georgia down here in Athens. And we do a whole different range of things. We look at everything from the impacts of plastic pollution to product design, to waste management infrastructure, and everything in between. So I'll be covering a lot of topics today. There will be chances at the end for you guys to ask questions. We're going to do the Kahoot, and then I will be available for questions after this as well. So you guys will know where to find me. But I just wanted to start off with a quick background on myself. So this was me as far back as I can remember. All I ever wanted to be was a mermaid. I was happiest in, around, under, near the ocean. And that was my life goal. And then when I realized that that was going to be a little bit tricky, I veered towards marine biology. And the ocean is really in my veins. I grew up actually all over the world in lots of different places, and none of them necessarily by the ocean. But my mom is a big sailor and a scuba instructor. That's me and my mom and my grandma. So 3 generations in their happy place in that photo in the middle. And so I couldn't think of anything better than being in my happy place and finding a career around something that I really cared about. And when this got into school, you know, my love of the ocean kind of led me towards things like ecology. And I had some really incredible opportunities to do travel and learn experiences. So I got to go to Fiji and the Galapagos, and I got to go to Brazil, to the rainforest there. And it made me understand a lot more about the interconnectedness of our planet. And it made me appreciate all of the different ways that everything was connected. You know, it made me realize that, as John Muir put it, when you try to pick out anything by itself in this world, we find that it is hitched to everything else in the universe. And similarly, a quote from one of my favorite explorers of all time, Sylvia Earle, one of the most epic female oceanographers and marine biologists there ever was. Without blue, there is no green. So while I started off with the love of the ocean and everything underwater, I realized that so much is dependent on that. And that also is, you know, the life force for so much else on our planet. So this led me towards ecology and conservation and sort of larger scale, how do we make the planet a better place? So my journey into the world of plastics.
Oh, and we've lost Taylor in our first broadcast of the year. That's no good. Our presentation's still up, but her devices are unconnected all of a sudden instantly. It keeps us on our toes today. It's been a strange day. I'm going to message Taylor really quick. Oh, she's in. She's being able to play with her screen, but she's not actually audible anymore. So we're hopefully going to get Taylor back in just a second. I will note as we're doing that, I just created the Padlet for her. So we will have the opportunity for additional questions after the broadcast today. We're bringing this back for the first time. So I'll make sure you have that link. And she's back. So I don't need to share that right now because we're good to go again. Hey, Taylor. We're back, but the audio's off now again, like we were in the test. We're going to figure it out on a new camera. I know, this is half the fun. Something should go wrong in every video call, as we learned over the last 4 years. There we go. We're going to play around with that. You play around with that for 2 quick seconds. I will. Oh, we almost had you, I think. It wants to work. It's thinking about it. Can you hear me now? Maybe. Your video's back to the main one. Chat with me again. No. You can hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, you're good.
Now I'm good?
If we jiggered, you're good now. We can hear you. Perfect. We're back in business.
Guys, I promise we practiced this beforehand. I have no idea why it just decided to throw a loop, but sorry about that. Holler at me if it's out again. Hopefully it won't. That was the weirdest thing.
Will do. We should be good to go. Best of luck.
Okay. Super weird. All right. Anyway, where were we? So, as I was saying before, my journey from what I affectionately call scuba diving to dumpster diving started when I went to get my master's degree in marine biodiversity and conservation. So I was studying in this very small country called Kiribati in the middle of the South Pacific. If you were to draw a line from Australia to Hawaii, it's like right in the middle, really no man's land in the South Pacific. And I was there to talk to them about their incredible coral reefs. They've got the most beautiful coral reefs in the entire world, and some of the biggest and healthiest that we've ever seen. And so I was imagining that the scene would look a lot like that top picture. And that was a lot of the island, sort of on the northern part of the island that I was on. You know, you would picture these idyllic beaches and beautiful South Pacific scenes. But what we ended up seeing was a lot of this. And this was a picture from what was the vast majority of beaches on the island that I was in Kiribati. And if you'd start to go through this trash, you would see it's not all from there. There was some from Japan. There was some from the US. There was some from Indonesia. Because of the way the ocean currents work, Kiribati is right in the middle of the South Pacific Gyre. And so trash comes from all over the world and gets deposited there. There was some from that country as well, but I just had a moment of, look at this immediate problem that's right here. And it feels so tangible and so solvable that I really couldn't ignore it anymore. And so I started, unpacking this. How did we get to having a scene like this in a pristine, perfect, little island in the middle of nowhere? So this sent me down a rabbit hole of how do we even get here in the first place? And the crazy thing about plastic, and this is something that maybe some of the students might not appreciate, but hopefully some of the teachers and people closer to my age will appreciate, but it's not that old of a product. We only really started making plastic in the 1950s. And since then, it has grown exponentially in the amount that we've produced. And if you look at this graph, that hot pink part on the bottom, so the largest proportion of it is packaging, which is largely single-use things. Those are things that are intended to be used once, usually less than 10 minutes, and then thrown away. So one of the exercises that I love to do is think about, or if you can, write it down, everything that you touch in the course of a day that is plastic. Let me look around you right now. Are your pens and pencils plastic? Is the chair that you're sitting in plastic? Is the desk that you're sitting at? What about the whiteboard? What about the light switch in your room? Plastic has really revolutionized transportation, food security, healthcare, and so many other sectors. But the fact that a lot of it is this not really durable, single-use material that's designed to be discarded immediately, and it's ending up in all the wrong places, has created this really big problem of scale. And when we think back to it, when plastics really first started becoming this miracle product in the 1950s, we were turning towards that as an alternative to natural products like ivory from elephant tusks, and different metals that were going into the war effort at that time. But again, it became, after the war, sort of synonymous with this throwaway living. And believe it or not, as you can see in this poster, even the idea of wrapping babies up in cellophane, something we would never see now. But the concept was that everything is better when it's wrapped in plastic. Everything stays fresh longer. And, you know, you're really in a privileged position if you're able to serve dinner on disposable plates and then throw it all away at the end. So, like I said, it's really changed the way that we live, but we've also designed ourselves into this corner of having lots of disposable things that are ending up in all the wrong place. And what do I mean by that? So our research group did a study back in 2016 to figure out where all plastic that had ever been made ever had ended up. And it turns out that the vast majority, so almost 80%, ends up in landfills or in the natural environment. Less than 10% of all of that gets recycled, and about 12% of that gets incinerated. And it turned out at the time that 8.3 billion metric tons of plastic waste had been produced at that time. So we now know that that number has continued to grow exponentially. And you can see on the right, there's some equivalents, but it's really just a mind-blowing quantity of stuff. And the way that we dispose of it hasn't really caught up with how quickly we're designing all these complex items. And one of the really difficult things is that plastic has become so ubiquitous, even though it's only been around for, 70 years or so. Some people that are around now can still remember back to before it was a thing, before we had plastic everywhere. But in that small amount of time, it has become something that touches everywhere on our planet. So this is a mashup of different data sets from National Geographic, but we've worked with scientists here that have found plastic in air particles above Mount Everest and at the bottom of the Mariana Trench at the deepest part of the ocean, and literally everywhere in between. So in this data set from 2018, all of those little pink circles out in the ocean were known quantities of microplastics. And so you can see where I was mentioning earlier, it kind of concentrates in the middle of these oceans because of the ocean currents. But interestingly, on this map, we also see all of those little yellow bits that are sort of jumping off of the continents. And those are known inputs into the ocean of plastic waste from land-based sources, which we've realized is around 80% of all of the plastic that ends up in the ocean is coming from the land. So not necessarily coming directly from ocean activities like fishing and boating, it's getting washed in from the land. So even if you live in Minnesota or North Dakota, or if you live inland in Canada, something that gets dropped on the ground there always has the potential to end up in the ocean. And what we realized around 2018 was that a lot of that mechanism was coming from river systems. There were about 10 rivers that were said to be responsible for 90% of the land-based plastic ending up in the ocean. And one of those 10 rivers was the Ganges River, which flows through India and Bangladesh in South Asia. And around this time, I was working as the director of the Plastics Initiative at National Geographic Society. And we decided to put together our skills in expeditions, storytelling, education, and reaching people around the world to conduct an expedition in the Ganges around the Planet or Plastic campaign that our magazine was doing. So hopefully you've seen this edition of the National Geographic magazine. This was from 2018. If not, highly recommend you guys checking it out. But this was our expedition team. So we put together the largest female-led expedition that National Geographic had ever run. We had scientists, technologists, storytellers, technologists, or I already said technologists, lots of ologists. from all over the world, especially early career scientists from India and Bangladesh, from the US, the UK, Canada. And what we did was travel the entire 1,600 miles of the length of the Ganges River, starting in the Bay of Bengal off of Bangladesh and going all the way up to the Gangotri Glacier up in the Himalayas in India, which is the source of the Ganges River. And we stopped along the way and investigated different aspects of plastic pollution. So we had a water-based team, and they were taking air samples, water samples, and sediment samples along the entire length of the river to look for microplastics. We had a land-based team that was looking at what type of trash do we see being deposited on land and how is it moving around the land? And also, what kind of plastic products do we see? What type of brands are they? What are they packaged in? And we had a community team that was doing a lot of investigation into how people feel about plastic pollution and plastic products. What are the sort of perceptions? What are the challenges, the opportunities? What kind of cool solutions are out there? And then last but not least, we had an amazing technology team that helped us put together all kinds of cool tools for studying plastic pollution, one of which were these sneaky little bottle tags. So we put a satellite tag in a brand of plastic bottle from India and deposited them at different points along the river so that we could see how plastic was actually moving through the river. And eventually we could see them go all the way out to the Bay of Bengal and bounce around in the Indian Ocean. And it was a really cool experiment. And we also had drones we were collecting data with. We tried underwater ROVs. It was really an all hands on deck experience. And the thing with plastic pollution is that you really need to understand all of these different components to be able to craft solutions. And one of the things that really came out of this is that there is no one silver bullet for plastic pollution. There is no one big solution that's going to solve everything. There are lots of different points where you can reduce plastic pollution along the life cycle. You can reduce production. You can think about how you design materials. So this is an example of what raw plastic resin looks like. So this is what we call virgin plastic resin. It is largely coming from fossil fuels, and it's extremely inexpensive right now. So one of the ways that we can reduce, that we can curb plastic pollution is reduce how much of this we're producing in the first place. We can also innovate materials and product design. So you can have silverware that's made from wood or starch, or it can be as simple as changing the color of something. So do you guys remember when Sprite switched from a green bottle to a clear bottle? That's because clear plastic has the highest value in the recycling sector. And green or other colored plastic can only be recycled into darker colored plastic. We can also reduce waste generation in the first place. So I don't know if you guys have ever seen this, but some stadiums now are using reusable stainless steel or aluminum cups for fountain drinks. I personally bring a reusable water bottle and reusable utensils everywhere that I go. We can also improve global waste management. So this is not only curbside recycling and my lovely trash truck that I have back here, but it's also making sure that people know where things go. One of the things that I challenge all of you to think about is, where does your waste go after you put it in the bin? It's an interesting pathway, and especially in the States, no two counties are the same. And if you know where your waste is going, it's going to make you a better steward of where you put that trash in the first place. And then we can improve litter capture. So this is something that usually happens downstream, but we can put in things like barriers, and we can set up films and things like that so that we don't end up with lots and lots of microplastic and tiny bits of plastic floating around that are hard to collect once they've gotten down to that point. And then ideally, all of these pieces are also learning from each other as we go. So when we see that there's lots of plastic bottle caps that are ending up at the end of the line, getting leaked into the environment, we can think, all right, how do we reduce the amount of those that are created, or rethink how it's designed, or encourage reusables, or come up with a better way to collect that at the end of its life, or all of those pieces together. So it can be a little bit of daunting, but I honestly see this as a positive thing because there are so many ways to curb plastic pollution. And one of the big things that sort of come out of this is this concept of circularity or circular economy, which hopefully you guys have come across at some point. But this is something that we spend a lot of time working in now in my lab here at the University of Georgia. Oh, no, it just left. Sorry, it popped off again, didn't it?
That's okay. It's just a quarter second. You'll be back.
Why does it do that?
I don't know.
That's so odd.
Who knows?
Sorry, guys. I don't know what's going on.
We've been humming along for 16 minutes, though. And while you're playing with this, I'll just note, too, we've been getting some great questions in the YouTube chat. So if you are on YouTube, you want to let us know where you're joining from, please do share there. And we'll be going to our Kahoot not too long after we talk about circularity a little bit together, which is exciting. So
Can you guys still hear me, though?
We can hear you. You're good. If you want to just bring up the presentation again, you'll be all set. Sorry that it's giving you
I'm so sorry, guys. And the first one of the thing, and here I am.
That's okay.
Sorry, guys. All right. Like I said, I promised we practiced this and it was working just fine, but here it goes. Okay, so circularity. So it kind of comes back to with those little arrows that I showed you, how do we close the loop? How do you make systems more circular in the first place? And what do we mean by this? So the idea of circularity is very similar to the concepts of ecology and nature. So every output eventually becomes an input. In a perfectly circular system, there's really no waste. Everything can go back into something. And you don't ever create an output that can't become an input back into the system in some productive way. This is not just recycling. So recycling definitely plays a role, but it cannot do all of those things, and it certainly cannot do it alone. So circularity is really an integrated approach with recycling, but also making sure the way that things are designed and the way that we use them also work in concert with all of those systems that we have downstream, like recycling and waste management. And one really cool thing about circularity is you can look at it at a lot of different scales. So the way that we look at it is in a specific city. So cities are really interesting test grounds for things like circularity and circular economy, because they're sort of closed systems where you can optimize, it's a fun one to say, optimize a lot of different systems. So we were thinking about how do we turn that linear system into a truly circular system? And because we're scientists, we say, how do we measure that? Which led us to something that we call the Circularity Assessment Protocol, or CAP. So this is a methodology that we've done in 51 different cities in 13 different countries. And through this, we actually go into a city and we measure 7 different data points to understand how circular of a system there is there for different materials. Usually we're looking at single-use plastic, but we're also doing this for things like construction materials. You can do this for metal or glass. Today, we're going to be talking about how we do it for plastic. But it really gives us a snapshot of what do those different pieces look like and how do we close that loop? Is it that, what are the most problematic things that end up in the environment? One of the things that we see, for example, is a ton of cigarette butts that end up in the environment. So that leads us to think, where can we close that gap? Where can we turn off that tap upstream in the system so that we're not ending up with all of those things downstream? So the way that we do this is, like I said, we actually collect data in these different sections. So we look at the input of products. So we look at what are the top brands. If you go into your convenience store, do you see Coca-Cola? Do you see Cheetos? Do you see Doritos? Do you see maybe some really interesting brands from other places? And how far away are they coming from? And also, what are they packaged in? We look at the community structure. So we do lots of talking to different types of stakeholders like government officials, private waste companies, informal waste workers, NGOs, about similar to what I was saying about the National Geographic expedition. We look at what are your challenges? What are your solutions? What are your barriers to related to plastic pollution? We also look at what type of materials you actually see in a community. We go to restaurants and stores and we say, what do your to-go containers look like? Do you guys might have like styrofoam clamshell containers as to-go things. You might see styrofoam cups, especially for fast food places. So we look at what does that actually look like within a city? What do they have available there? We see if there's any kind of use or reuse systems. So here in Athens, we used to have this really great store that we called the Refillery, where you could bring your own container and get dish soap, hand soap, shampoo, conditioner. There's also stores where you can buy food in bulk. So you can bring your own container for rice or tea or coffee. So we look at what kind of opportunities there are for that. We look at what waste collection looks like. Believe it or not, the generation of waste is a very basic human function, but what it looks like is very different in different cities. I have seen all different kinds of trash cans, all different kinds of trash, and it actually tells you a lot about people when you look at what gets thrown away and how it gets thrown away. For end of cycle, we're looking at everything that happens after it gets collected. So is there recycling? Is there a landfill? Is there incineration? Is there waste to energy? What does that look like? And how does that match the material that we're seeing in the community? And last but not least, we do a really detailed look at litter. So using, other side, our trusty little measuring wheels, we do transects along the city where we look at what type of litter is ending up in the environment and how did it get there in the first place and how do we stop it from getting there? So all of this data comes together and we get some really great information that goes back to the city. But we also provide a set of opportunities, which usually in a best case then gets turned into actual action plans and projects. So we've got cities all over the world that are using this information to target some really cool projects in their own backyard. And one thing I wanted to mention as the last piece here is that we have an app called Debris Tracker. And this is actually what we use to track the litter when we do our CAP, when we do our protocol around the world. But this is also a free open source app that anyone in the world can use. So if you want to know more about what trash is in your own backyard, you can use this app. And we've been working with National Geographic to put together a whole lot of education materials and videos and workbooks around this app. So you should definitely take a look at that and play around with it. And it can give you some really great data, such as this. So this was a screen grab that I actually took this morning from our Debris Tracker website that I saw Jesse just shared. So this is just the Debris Tracker data that's been collected in the last 6 months. So in the last 6 months, we've had almost 700,000 litter items documented on almost every continent around the world. And the vast majority of that litter, so about 76%, has been plastic. And some of the top items that we see here are cigarettes, food wrappers, hard plastic fragments, foam fragments, and bottle caps. So see if you see those sort of things in your own backyard too. And if you want to know what you've got going on in your city, anyone can use this app. It's free, it's easy. And then you can immediately, once you upload your data, go onto this world map on our website and zoom into your own backyard and see what you've collected. So I just want to end with a couple things on what you can do before we jump into the Kahoot. So the issue of plastic pollution can feel really daunting, especially if you do one of those exercises where you see how many plastic things you touch in a day. Usually I can barely make it through breakfast. But it can feel like a really big problem. But one of the reasons that I got into the field of plastic pollution in the first place is because I really do believe that it is solvable. This is a problem that is tangible for everyone in the world. And it's something that has not been around that long. We've designed our way into this challenge, and I really believe we can design our way out. So I want to leave you guys with some hopeful points of things that you can do beyond, actually getting involved in data collection, which I'm happy to talk about more. But it used to be the 3 R's. Now I call it the 4 R's. I know some people even have 6 and 7 R's. So we say refuse is really the first step. So are there things that you just simply don't need? Do you need to maybe not use a straw when you get a drink? Do you need to not take a grocery bag when maybe you can just carry things to your car? So the first step is really refusing. Reducing is the next step. So do you need to use a Ziploc bag for every single individual thing that you're putting in your fridge? Or maybe you can reduce that by having, one big bag. There's lots of different ways that you can reduce. Reuse is a big one. So when you get a new glass jar, can you maybe keep reusing that? And if you get, a reusable bag at the grocery store, can you use that multiple times? Recycling is the last of the 4 R's because it really is a hierarchy. Recycling should sort of be your last option. But as we said earlier, it's a really important piece of the puzzle. So if you're able to recycle, definitely do that in your city and your community. The second one is just to get involved. This is, as Jesse said at the beginning, this is a really pertinent topic and something that everyone in the world can relate to. Get involved with volunteer cleanups, stay up to date on research. There's lots of different ways to get involved. Use your voice. So I know this probably sounds cheesy and you guys probably hear this all the time, but I really want you to take on board that you are the next generation of leaders in this space. You can use your voice to inform others. You can write your government representatives. You can do polls at your school. You can do your own litter cleanups and get your own data. Never underestimate what people want to hear what you have to say. And solutions come from everywhere in this space, and there are no dumb ideas. Citizen science, like I mentioned, we can use the debris tracker app, or there's lots of other things out there to get involved in actual data collection, and I'm happy to talk about that more. Power of the consumer. This is something we don't always talk about, but you're really voting every time you spend $1 on a product. So, if you're able to, think about where you want to put your money in terms of a consumer and what you want to support in terms of sustainable products. Like I said, know your waste. There is no away. So even once you put your bottle in the recycling bin, that does not mean it just goes magically away. That's going to a sorting facility that's going to get sold as recycling somewhere, hopefully. So do a little investigation into what your waste stream looks like. And last but not least, stay curious. Like I said, solutions come from everywhere in this space. There are no one big solutions. There are lots and lots and lots of different ways to solve this problem, especially in different ways that make sense for you and your community. So keep asking tough questions and keep an open mind about how you can make our future better. And with that, I will pass it back over to Jesse and apologize again for my technical difficulties.
No apology necessary. That was fantastic, Taylor. Thank you so much for that. And again, one of the nice things about this generation of students is that you kids know these facts. You're keen on it. You are the biggest voices in the world. So you know that it's not trite to say use your voice because you're already doing it so much, both in your personal lives and en masse around the world. So thank you for diving in with that in such detail and highlighting some of your amazing expeditions. As you've been highlighting, we are going to do a little Kahoot together for the next couple minutes. So I'm going to share my screen for that. The game pin is below. For those who are new to Kahoot, the faster you answer, the more points you get. And you don't win anything, but you do win Taylor and I's everlasting respect. And of course, if you don't have Kahoot, that's totally fine too. You can just play along in your class and have fun that way. I'm going to get us started with this, and then we are going to go to Grisham Middle School, Miss Hance's class, for our first question right after that. So we're good. If you come in after we've got underway, game pin is still up on the screen, 753-884. Let's do this thing, folks, and start our Kahoot together.
Love these nicknames.
I know, right? They're the best. My favorite ever, we had a program once where the Kahoot name matched the animal we were talking about, and that person won, and it was amazing. All right. Just how much plastic have we created? Okay. Waste have we created? So earlier in the slide deck, this was on screen for a minute. In 2017, I think was the latest update. Is it 100 million tons, a billion tons, over 8 billion tons, or 500 billion tons? All of these are outlandishly large. Like no one can actually wrap their mind around this as a concept, but I want to see you try. So 38 answers in. Most of you got this right. You were paying really close attention to that. That's fantastic, everybody. Cool. Okay. Where does our leaderboard lie? Proud Bears in the lead. Noble Frogs right behind. Great.
Polite Piranha. I like that.
Face palming right now. Yes, Polite Piranha is delightful. They are polite. They're a malign fish for no reason. All right. True or false? Plastic waste has been found in the highest mountain and the deepest undersea trench. I will note too, I created this Kahoot before I talked with Taylor today, and she literally said whether this is true or false in the broadcast by complete fluke. So it's perfect. What do we got? 38 answers, 39. It's more than this too. I think we're going to have a lot of correct answers in this, but like the most remote islands in the Pacific, we find it in the snows of Antarctica. It is undeniably true. Our plastic waste is.
But also my heart goes out to those 6 that say that's not true because like, I love that. It would be wonderful.
Optimism.
Love the optimism.
Proud Bear stays in our lead. In fact, the leaderboard remained the exact same. I think our grade 11s might be on the ball. The Cetosaurus expedition followed plastic waste on what major river? I want to note, as we've got the picture of this up and while you're picking our river of our 4 options, we did many programs with the Cetosaurus team. So Taylor joined us for a bunch, but we've got many members of that expedition that joined us. They're all on our YouTube channel. I can't encourage you to check that out enough. It's one of the coolest expeditions we've ever featured. Some really incredible stories there. So head to that YouTube channel below. Ooh, we had a few people. I threw in some foreign named rivers and we tripped some people up. But
I like it.
Is our correct answer in India, or the big river there? 21 of you got this right. Let's see if it shakes up our leaderboard. Proud Bear is just going to go wire to wire, I think. This is for the win on our final question. And then Grisham Middle School, you will be our first Q&A. Debris Tracker, extraordinary citizen science app. I want us all to go home knowing about Debris Tracker. It's made in partnership with who? National Geographic, the Explorers Club, University of Georgia, or the U.S. government? They got involved. What do we think? I'll give a hint. It's a group that we work with a lot. We do a lot of programs with people affiliated with this organization. And I think a lot of you are going to get this right. It is National Geographic. Very good. Way to go. While we're waiting for the podium to come in, YouTubers, please do share more questions. Ms. Michael's class, you guys have been amazing. Noble Dog in third. Rapid Gator in second. Was a unicorn for some reason. And number 1, did it? Wire to wire, Proud Bear, wire to wire. Way to go. Who's a penguin in a crown for some reason. Very cool, guys. Thank you very much for the Kahoot. As I said, we are going to go to Grisham. Come on in. So nice to have you back, Miss Hance. Welcome to the broadcast.
They're on us. Talk, y'all. So,
Hi, guys.
it's us. We're celebrating our win. We got first and second on the Kahoot. So,
Nicely done. Bravo, bravo. Do you have any questions for Taylor?
One of my questions is, while you were like digging through like the plastic, what was one of the craziest things you found?
Ooh.
The easiest things we found. I mean, the things that you find that people throw out are really bizarre. So we've found, like whole televisions and whole microwaves and lots of shopping carts, like in stream cleanups that just get thrown away, in river systems around cities. So those are always bizarre to find. We also find lots of strange toys. So we have like a little shelf in our office where we found like, little pieces of plastic toys, lots of like small cars and little animals. So, it's it's like you see a little bit of everything. Nothing surprises me at this point.
Never a dull moment in plastic waste navigating.
No.
I'm going to head to our second question. Taylor, just a quick note with your screen share still up. If you can't see me, by all means, get rid of screen share and come back for this.
Okay.
But if you can see us, great.
Okay.
Let's head to our George Webster crew, Ms. Bakir's class. Welcome in Toronto, guys. We were just in Austin, by the way. So Texas to Toronto. Hey.
Hold on. Who wants to talk? Go up to here and talk. Go quick.
Come on up. Fine, you're good. Matt, youth leadership crew next.
Hello.
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 Okay, say what you need to say.
Wait.
You
say something. You say something first. Okay, you say it.
Michael, please, give a question.
Why is there so much trash being thrown in the ocean?
Ooh.
Why is there so much trash being dumped in the ocean? So this is a good question. And it's hard because I don't think people have, most of the time, people are not intentionally dumping trash in the ocean. So, when we talk about like a dumpster truck worth of plastic getting dumped into the ocean every minute, it doesn't mean dumpster trucks are actually pulling up and dumping that trash into the ocean. It usually means that it's been dropped somewhere or has somehow gotten out of the waste stream and ends up down there. So part of why we were using those plastic bottle trackers is to understand if you drop something on land, how does that get into the ocean and how fast does it get into the ocean? So it comes from lots of different sources. It can come from just litter. It can come from if like a waste management process is not working correctly. It can come from ocean-based sources. So things like fishing gear or other boating things end up in the ocean as waste. I like to think that people are not intentionally dumping a lot of trash in the ocean, but it does end up there in lots of different ways. And oftentimes it's things that are really lightweight or really hard to capture or not easy to recycle. So things like plastic bags, plastic films, food wrappers, all of those things that you saw as top items in Debris Tracker, those are the things that end up in the environment because they're just, it's easy for them to end up there.
Yep. For a class in Toronto, if you've seen a shopping bag flying down the street, that could end up in the Don River, the Humber River,
Yeah.
and go to the lakes and end up in the ocean. I mean, it's quite amazing how many paths lead to the oceans. And so this is how the waste ends up there. I love that question. Thanks, guys. And we got that on YouTube as well. Our youth leadership crew, 11-12, Mr. Douglas's class, welcome back. If you guys have a question for us, come on in and take us away.
I have a question.
Please.
Yeah.
I don't know if you said, but how long was the expedition and what was one of like the key things that you learned from it?
Cool.
Good question. So it was interesting. We actually did the expedition twice because we wanted to do it before the monsoon season and after the monsoon season to see how much the rain flowing down the river affected it. So we did 2 months in the spring of our spring, and then 2 months in the fall. So it was 4 months overall. And then we were actually on the expedition for 2 months and then another 2 months. And yes, I saw that Jesse just dropped in the chat. There's some reports that came out about some of the key findings and also a little bit more about all the methods that we used. So if you want to replicate any of those methods, those are all on there for you guys to use. And there were a couple really big things. I think the movement of the plastic waste was something that was really interesting. We were able to look at where are there opportunities for kind of catching things before they end up in the river, before they end up in the Bay of Bengal. We got some really wild data on just the quantity of microplastics that are coming from the river. I mean, at the tune of like billions per week or day. We also found some really interesting sources. So we were finding things like fishing nets that are used like along the river get discarded really regularly. And there's not really an enterprise for reusing them or fixing them or upcycling them. So we identified a couple new sources of plastic pollution and similarly found lots of fibers and found that clothing is actually contributing in a lot of places, especially where there's a big textile industry. But I think just one of the main findings was just the sheer scale of the problem and also just all the really cool ways that people are trying to work towards solutions. I mean, one of the really neat things is that everywhere that we went, someone had some sort of solution that they were working towards, whether it was, there were people that would use plastic bags to sort of like weave them or knit them into, pads or mattresses that would be, used for camping or whatever. So there's lots of different solutions out there. We saw lots of people, interestingly, that were using things like banana leaves, there's a whole generation of people that can remember, like I said, before we had plastic, and we're like, I used to bring my tins to the store and I would refill that for my food, or, we would wrap our to-go food in banana leaves and it actually tasted better too. So there were really cool solutions along the way. And yeah, I could talk about that expedition all day, but highly encourage you to check out some of the reports that came out of it.
I will share that report with all the registered classes if you want to dive in, do a deep dive, lots of opportunity to do that. A couple notes before we go to our next question. I do know for some of our classes nearing the end of your time, so I'm going to come to Ms. Sussman and Ms. Nancy's class in just a second. I will note Taylor has graciously agreed to have a Padlet for this one. So if you have like 50 more questions after this broadcast and you want to bug Taylor directly, we're going to leave that up for 2 days. So you can check that out, email, put the questions there, and she'll get the chance to check them out and answer them. Let's head to Ms. Sussman's class, and then I'm going to head to Madam Nancy to wrap up after that. But come on in, Ms. Sussman. Hey.
Hi, my name is Noah, and my question was that do you have a team that checks animals' health?
Ooh, a team health, yeah.
That's a great question. So we actually did have a team when we were on the expedition, believe it or not, that was looking at different types of animal poop and seeing what kind of microplastics might be in there. One of the really interesting things that we found in India is that historically people have brought their livestock, so like cows and goats and things, to feed on landfills because it was mostly organic food and things, food scraps and waste like that. But now they're still bringing them to feed there, and instead they're eating plastic bags and they're eating chip bags, and that's getting stuck in their digestive system and making them ill, which everyone we talk to, would notice that. We've also worked with scientists that have looked at things like seabirds because they live in such remote places. Seabirds are really susceptible to ingesting plastic. And so we've worked with some people that have done research on the impact on seabirds, also on marine mammals. So things like ingestion, but also getting entangled in fishing nets is a big problem for marine mammals and marine turtles. And then I personally am about to do some more research on plastic in fish, so fish that we eat, and looking at how much microplastic is actually ending up in the fish that end up on our plate.
Very, very cool. I will note too, for any of our classes that are keen on our YouTube channel, we have done dozens of programs on plastics with birds, with fish, in the food supply. So you can check out some of those broadcasts as well with scientists just like Taylor. I will note, Miss Nancy, if you want to flick on your camera, I'll know you're good to go for a question, but you've really inspired the Glenview, Illinois Abaca West class. They have been sharing so many questions in the chat. You even got Della, who has noted that her dream job is to take plastic or trash out of the ocean. So way to go, Della. That's the goal of these broadcasts. So fantastic query. I'll take one from their class. One that might be easy, might be challenging, from Sean. Is there a river that brings the most trash to the ocean, like the peak river for garbage?
So I don't necessarily want to call out one, but there was an interesting study that said that there were 10 river systems around the world that contributed the vast majority of that. So the Ganges is one of the big ones. The Yangtze River was one of the big ones. But, you know, we've got major river systems. If you look at how much is coming from like the Mississippi River in the States, from the Amazon in South America, there's a lot of them. And I encourage you guys to do some research into that, you know, so what the top ones are. But the Ganges we selected because it was one of those top 10.
And again, a lot of those rivers are the biggest rivers in the world. So it's not particularly surprising.
Right.
It's not like that one country's particularly putting a lot of trash. It just happens to be a gigantic river and a gigantic tap for, Taylor, this has been fantastic. I want to make sure we have some classes left to say a big thank you and farewell, because I know it's the end of some of their school days. So a big thank you to you. Again, at classes, check out Cetosaurus, the Nat Geo Ganges expedition. I'll send all those resources in just a minute. Debris Tracker is a spectacular app if you want something to do with your class when you're done this broadcast. It is just amazing stuff. And of course, as I said, you can share additional questions. Thank you, Taylor, on the Padlet that I'll make sure she has a link for in just a minute. But what we do to wrap up every broadcast, I'm going to bring in our remaining classes to say a big thank you and farewell. So Grisham Middle School, Austin, Toronto at George Webster, Madam Nancy's class, thank you so much, everybody, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye, everyone. Thank you.